It's the SNL Hall of Fame podcast with your host, Jamie Dew, Chief Librarian Thomas Senna, and featuring Matt Ardill. And now, curator of the hall, Jamie Dew.
All right. How are you doing? Welcome to season 3. I am Jamie Dew, and it is my pleasure to welcome you inside the SNL Hall of Fame. But before you do, please wipe your feet. The SNL Hall of Fame podcast is a weekly affair. Each episode, we take a deep dive into the career of a former cast member, host, musical guest, or writer, and add them to the ballot for your consideration. Once the nominees have been announced, we turn to you, the listener, to vote for the most deserving and help determine who will be enshrined for perpetuity inside the hall. We just finished doing that last week for season 2. We announced the class of season 2, and it's a banger of a class. You should check that out. It's headlined by Will Ferrell. Norm Macdonald made it in on the second ballot, plus many more. You've got to check out episode 20 of season 2 to find out the whole skinny. But this is season 3, and here we are, ready to rock in season 3. We've got a great lineup of nominees to get to, including this week's nominee, Dana Carvey. What a way to kick off season 3, huh? Now, what I'm doing right now is I'm going to walk down the hall and I'm going to go over to Matt's Minutia Minute Corner and talk to Matt over there. Hey, Matt, how you doing, my friend?
Hey, Jamie. Today I've got the pistachio disguisee of SNL, Dana Carvey, 5'8", born June 2nd, 1955. He is an interesting character. Cross-country champion, the degree in broadcast communications. Over his period at SNL, he was nominated 6 times for Emmys, received 1, and is number 90 on the Comedy Central list of 100 greatest stand-ups of all time. Yeah, and he comes from an interesting family as well. His brother, Brad, who is the bassist for Garth, is actually an inventor who invented the video toaster special effects technology. So if you watch Babylon 5, you can thank the real-life Garth for the cool special effects. And his early roles include bit parts in Halloween 2, and as one of the mime waiters in This Is Spinal Tap.
Yes.
Reporting to Billy Crystal. He actually was almost the host of Double Dare. He was up for that on Nickelodeon at the same time as he was up for SNL, and actually had to refuse the opportunity to host that Nickelodeon classic. Now, after Second City, he actually went on to do some pretty incredible career lifting for young comedians on the Dana Carvey show, and kind of helped launch the careers of Stephen Colbert, Steve Carell, Louis C.K., as well as Charlie Kaufman and Robert Carlock. So Charlie Kaufman of Eternal Sunshine and Robert Carlock of 30 Rock.
That's right. Partner.
Yeah.
Not marriage partner, but like a writing partner.
Yeah. So he's pretty amazing. And he's got big time fans, I guess. Like George H.W. Bush loved his impersonation of him to the point he invited Dana Carvey to the White House. And Kirk Douglas worked with him in the movie Tough Guys and helped him get over his fear of doing a stunt on top of a train, and was so adored by Kurt, he was invited to speak at his 100th birthday party.
Really?
Yeah. So he's a interesting fella, Dana Carvey.
Absolutely.
Well, what do you say we kick it downstairs to our friend Thomas Senna? He's down there with Darrin Patterson. Yeah, that's right. We got it downstairs here in the SNL Hall of Fame. You thought that this was all upstairs? No, there's a downstairs. Season 3 spoiler. There's a downstairs. So let's kick to that right now. This is Thomas Senna having a conversation with Darrin Patterson about Dana Carvey.
Hi, Darrin Patterson from the SNL Nerds podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Thomas. Thank you.
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm super excited about this episode. One of my all-time favorite cast members. We're going to be talking about Dana Carvey today. A lot to get into. So with Dana, I find interesting, he started his tenure at SNL in season 12 when the show was being seriously retooled. So what were your memories, even after the fact, of where SNL was like in season 11, heading into when Dana and a bunch of other cast members started into season 12?
I think that was probably the season when I started to get into SNL. Like I first discovered it. Like I first discovered kind of SNL like years ago when I was like a little kid, like back in the 70s. Like I think I remember seeing my dad watch it, and they did the land shark sketch, the Candygram. And like when I first saw that, I thought it was kind of scary, but also kind of weird and silly at the same time. So like I've always been into SNL since then. But once Dana Carvey kind of came on the scene, that's when I really started to watch it more and more. Just because like he himself is just like so entertaining, and there's something about him that I think like younger people just automatically like his, all of his impressions, all the characters he brought. There was something he brought in like a little bit of. I mean, maybe he was maybe more mainstream palatable or whatever, but he was still had like a kind of a dark, weird sense of humor at times. But I don't know. I think once he came in, like I don't know, it really boosted the show up quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, his presence was much needed. I mean, he came in with Phil Hartman, Jan Hooks, Kevin Nealon, kind of that group. John Lovitz and Nora Dunn and Dennis Miller were the holdovers from a quite frankly, a notoriously bad season 11. Yeah. That's when we had like Anthony Michael Hall, Robert Downey Jr. I mean, no offense to those people, but they're not quite SNL cast member material, I suppose. So Dana, you're right. He came in. I think he and Phil and those other cast members breathed a lot of new life into the show, and especially Dana, for sure. And I wanted to start off, and with a lot of these, we don't necessarily have to go chronologically, but I think with Dana, it actually really fits to start right at the beginning, because one of the most popular characters of all time debuted in Dana's very first episode, and that was the church lady. So do you have... Yeah, right. Exactly. He debuted the church lady in his very first episode. Like, talk about coming out with a bang. So, I mean, what do you remember about the church lady in particular and some of the early Dana stuff?
Wow. I mean, well, the earliest Dana thing I remember, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about, like, I used to really like watching like a stand-up comedy on HBO. And I remember Dana was on the HBO Young Comedians show back in the day. And he had this one bit where he played piano, the Chopping Broccoli song. Yeah. And like, I think he brought that over. No, he definitely did. He brought that over to SNL, and he had that Chopping Broccoli song, which like, I don't know, I always got a kick out of that. That's like my earliest memory of it. Which, just and chopping broccoli.
There's a lady I know. If I didn't know her, she'd be the lady I didn't know. And my nanny, she went downtown. She bought some broccoli. She brought it home. She's chopping broccoli. Chopping broccoli. She's chopping broccoli. Chopping broccoli.
That was actually in that first episode too.
Really?
That, along with the church lady, that Derek Stevens character that sang the Choppin' Broccoli song, that was in that same episode.
Yeah, so just right at the gate, he's just coming out with heat. And I mean, we'll get into it later on, but it's so weird because, like, I would think for any SNL cast member, you'd be lucky if you're able to have one reoccurring character that hits with the audience so well, that has a cool catchphrase, that like has likability, and is just able to sort of like people see you and they automatically can say your catchphrase and everything. Like Dana Carvey, when you really think about it, he had like 3 or 4 of those characters where they all had catchphrases and people. I mean, we'll get into it a little bit later. Like I kind of wrote them down, but like but with the church lady up top, I mean, this was also, I guess, around the time where like televangelists were really becoming prominent in culture. You know, Jimmy Timmy Faye Bakers and whatnot. So to have, this guy kind of come out of nowhere doing this character, just called himself the church lady. I don't think she ever had a name. I don't think they ever said.
I think it was Enid.
Enid? No, it wasn't Enid. Because like there was that episode where Fred Savage hosted, and like Fred Savage came on as the church lady's niece, Enid. I think that was Enid. But like I'm not sure if the church lady ever had a name. But anyway, like he was just this unknown guy just come out and do this, this church lady impression. Isn't that already have a catchphrase ready? Isn't that special? Have a little smirk on her face, and it's just like right off the rip. It's just like it's very memorable and likable, and just get a kick out of it.
All righty, now Joey, you are what is called, I believe, a quarterback. Now, what do you do?
Well, I run the offense.
Now, how does that work?
Well, the center snaps the ball.
Is that when a heavy-set gentleman squats down and passes the pigskin between his thighs, where your hands are nestled near his bulbous naughty place?
Well, that's one way of putting it. Then I try to complete a pass to a tight end who usually goes deep and long, and hopefully we score.
Now, do I hear you correctly, Joey? You make a pass at a tight end who likes to go deep and long, and this is how you score.
That's correct.
Well, isn't that special?
And one of the things that I really loved about the church lady that I started picking up more so as I got older was just the subtle things about how maybe repressed the church lady actually was, this pent up sort of lust, I guess, that was behind it all. Because church lady, a lot of the thing was like shaming whoever was big in pop culture at the time. So like you mentioned like Madonna, you mentioned Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. They had come as Phil Hartman and Jan Hooks, Sean Penn, Rob Lowe. So that was kind of the church lady's thing, was to shame people in pop culture. But what I started picking up on as I was watching it as I got older was the pent up, the repressed nature of the church lady. And like, Dana did a lot of subtle things like that.
Right. Yeah. Like that is true. I didn't think about that. Like how she did have the church lady had a sort of holier than thou, no pun intended, like a view of the world, and how she would have guests on just to publicly shame them and just call them sinners to their face. That's it. Like just that concept of a talk show is funny enough. And yeah, it's all, and she always kind of went into this talk about like, oh, aren't you, your hot male buttocks thrusting, and like he would get into all these odd wordplay about, just sex and fornication, and it was just like, oh my god, what's going on? Yeah, and it was just hilarious to see this happen. It was just
and she ended up in one of the installments later on. She ended up spanking Rob Lowe for being a sinner or something, and
right. That was like during the his scandal with the sex tape.
Exactly. Yeah. So she was kind of punishing him for that, but you get the sense that the church lady was getting her thrills by doing that to Rob as well. So where do you want to go from here? What are just some of the things that popped out to you about Dana?
Well, I mean, like I said earlier, like he was a guy who came out. Like I said, like it's hard enough for a cast member to come out with one reoccurring character that has a catchphrase that everybody loves and just connects with everybody. And Dana Carvey had 3, maybe 4, I guess, if you want to count this 4th one. He had Hans and Franz. We will pump you up. He had Wayne and Garth, Wayne's World. Garth Algar, Party Time, excellent. The 4th one, if you want to count it, his impression of George H.W. Bush.
Good evening, my fellow Americans. In the past, when I've spoken to you from this office here, the news has always been good, not bad, good. Berlin Wall, collapse of communism, that Noriega thing over there. Good. It's no wonder I'm up around that 80% approval area. But now tonight, the news I have to bring to you, it's not good. In fact, it's kind of bad. Maybe after you hear it, my approval rating will slip down to 75%. Little joke there for you.
I mean, you could say he did. You can't just say he did. He had like the ultimate impression of George W. Bush. Like all the other Bush's impressions were sort of based off his impression.
Mm-hmm.
Not gonna do it and wouldn't be prudent and all that stuff. Like that's all stuff Bush didn't say, but it feels like stuff he would have said. And like,
exactly.
He did the impression in front of the actual president, George Bush Sr. and George Bush Sr. loved it. I mean, and also if you want to really get into impressions, I mean, he had a laundry list of them. Like, let me see what I wrote here. His Jimmy Stewart impression, his Paul McCartney, Tom Brokaw, Mickey Rooney, Johnny Carson, his Ross Perot impression, where can I finish? Casey Kasem, the McLaughlin group, which was I always loved the McLaughlin group. It was just fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you want to count impressions, I mean, he did an impression of a fellow SNL cast member right next to the SNL, like his Dennis Miller impression. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think that had ever been done before. And
To this day, that's one of my favorites.
yeah,
And he still does it. I mean, to this day, you listen to his podcast
Yeah.
and he breaks into the Dennis Miller impression.
Yeah.
And I always get a kick out of that. And the voice, I mean, it's a cartoonish version of Dennis, but it sounds a lot like him too. And he has the whole head waggle. He wags his head and has the little smirk on his face. And that's the one of the ones that I noted too, for sure. Another one where, was Casey Kasem early on. He did a Casey Kasem impression, and that one actually stuck out to me. And I like to think about just impressions in general on the show. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I look at impressions as it's not enough to just sound like the person, to just mimic the person. There has to be a comedic angle about the person or something silly. There has to be a comedic hook there that isn't just, oh my gosh, they sound like that person. And the Casey Kasem early on, he debuted this in his second episode. It was a Weekend Update piece that he came on and did. And I highlight Casey Kasem as an example of why Dana was so good at impressions, is because if you remember the Casey Kasem one, it was really dark. He would use the hammy Casey Kasem DJ voice, but talk about really dark material. That was the hook.
This week, a viewer writes, Casey, whatever happened to Eddie Fontaine? I loved his hit song, Spank Me to Heaven, and was wondering if he still records. Bill Napier, Billings, Montana. Well, Bill, Eddie was accused of assaulting his manager with a deadly weapon with intent to kill.
I don't know. Is that something you see in his other impressions, like that comedic hook that he always would find?
Yeah, I do. Now that you mentioned it. Yeah. Well, that also what you mentioned, what you just said is, like that's again a little bit of his dark humor seeping through. Because while he does sort of seem like he does kind of present as all-American boy next door, I guess, with his looks and his likability with he seems like kind of very middle America, like everybody likes him. He's very mainstream, but he does have that dark sense of humor through some of his stuff. Of course, later on we'd see that in the Dana Carvey show. The ill-fated Dana Carvey show on channel.
Oh my gosh! Yes.
Yeah, that's a whole nother thing. But and you also see his dark humor in things like Massive Head Wound Harry and whatnot. Yeah, I did notice that. It is I do notice a few impressionists do that, where they expect the impression to do a lot of the heavy lifting within a sketch, where they're like, "Oh, I'm doing this spot-on impression, and that should be enough to carry the sketch." And a lot of times it's not. A lot of times it's like, "Oh, that's a great impression. Now what? and like they kind of have nowhere else to go. Whereas I think with Dana, he always had somewhere to go with his impressions. Like, the Jimmy Stewart impression when they did that It's a Wonderful Life of, Lost Ending.
That was classic.
That was pretty fantastic. Yeah, but they were going somewhere with it and they were saying something as they were, beating an old man.
It was like a darker version of the beloved Jimmy Stewart from It's a Wonderful Life.
Again, his dark humor is shining through right there.
That's interesting. That's something that a lot of people never really talked about with Dana. And you're right. He was this clean cut guy who could. He was from the Bay Area, but he could have been from Iowa or anywhere in Middle America, right. For all we could guess. So you're absolutely right. Like that was part of his charm, I think, was that darkness that kind of seeped through.
Yeah. He had like a few things. Like I think maybe he also knew that he could maybe get away with a little bit more because like America just liked him so much. That's why he was. So like he was like, I think I can get away with something that maybe somebody else couldn't get away with, like, Lyle, the effeminate heterosexual or something like that. So I think he sort of played up to that.
Yeah, so you had mentioned, you had brought up one of his other famous characters, Garth Algar from Wayne's World, which when Mike Myers came on the show, a few episodes after Mike debuted, he and Dana started doing the Wayne's World sketches. Do you have what was your impressions of Wayne's World when they started doing those sketches?
When I first saw it, I think because I was around at like teenage age when I first saw it. Like I immediately liked it because it was just like this kind of very loose, this very kind of loose, free flowing sketch. You could just tell like, oh, it's like two teenagers, quote unquote, in a basement, just talking about girls and guitars and just making silly, goofy jokes that like me and my buddies would do. I related to it quite a bit. So like, and they just had like a really cool likability to them, and just like just like a laid back kind of silly vibe to those whole sketches. Like immediately, I was like, I think like from what I remember though, the first times it aired, I don't think it clicked very well with the audiences. So it took a while for the audience to find its rhythm. But like I remember watching it and like sort of almost immediately kind of digging it.
It's Friday, it's 10:30, it's time to party. I'm your excellent host, Wayne Campbell. With me as always is Garth.
Party on, Wayne.
Party on, Garth. Okay, before we bring out our first guest, Garth, what'd you get for Christmas?
I got a Game Boy.
Excellent. What else?
A Batman poster of Kim Basinger. What a bitch!
Yeah. No guff.
Oh yeah, and you bought me the Nintendo Power Glove. Thanks, Wayne.
Hey, it's my pleasure. You're a bud. Swing!
Swing!
Yeah. I remember when, some of my favorites were when they would do their like movie reviews, and they would just say like, oh, this sucked, or it sucked donkey balls, and then or Wayne would give like this eloquent review of one movie or something. I like when Wayne and Garth were kind of like they did lists, or like their top 10 lists, or they had a sort of structure or something to that. When Aerosmith appeared on the show with them, that was pretty fun.
Yeah, with Tom Hanks in that sketch.
With Tom Hanks, exactly. So I actually know Garth.
Oh, really?
That's something that I know Garth because Garth was based off of Dana's brother, Brad.
Yes, right.
Yeah, because his brother Brad was kind of like a tech geek, kind of like soft-spoken, kind of talk like that. And Brad created some software that a company that I used to work for used, and sometimes Brad would come into the office to do training and to talk to management about the software, and he would just loiter and hang out like a few feet from my desk.
Wow.
It was the most wild thing, and I would talk to him, and he did talk like Garth a little bit. Like, I mean, that's what he sounded like, and me and a coworker tried our best not to like freak out every time he came into the office because Garth was like right in front of us. So
I would freak out. Yeah, like I freak. I mean, I'm sure for people who know, I'm sure he gets inundated with questions about his brother all the time. So it's hard not to be not to nerd out and be like, so what's your brother like? And like, like you're Chris Farley talking to Paul McCartney or something.
Exactly. I think he brought up Dana maybe a couple of times just in conversation, or he would say like, "Oh yeah, my brother did this or was in that movie." So we did play it cool, but I think Garth means a lot to me in that sense because I kind of interacted with the person who he's based off of. But I mean, gosh, made 2 movies out of that too. I mean, we should talk about the Wayne's World and Wayne's World 2. Like, do you remember seeing those when they came out?
Yeah, Wayne's World 2, I don't know if I saw it in the theaters. I might have. I definitely think I remember seeing Wayne's World, the first one, in the theater, and I really liked it. Again, it's like a lot of silly humor. I mean, teenage me. Look, if you just say the word "swing," you already make me laugh. It didn't take much to get me giggling. Yeah, I mean, Tia Carrere. I mean, I will say this. I will say that I really thought Ed O'Neill's character was like the unsung hero of that film. Like, just like to this day, like me and my friends say things like, what was it? Like, I never did a crazy thing before in my life before that night. Like go back and go back and watch Wayne's World, because like he was doing some like low key, like really hilarious stuff in there that was just all these weird non sequiturs. He was
like demented monologues and stuff. I think going back and watching some of the Wayne's World sketches, I think that Ed O'Neill character from the movie kind of originated in a sketch on SNL.
Oh.
When Ed O'Neill hosted, he appeared on Wayne's World, and I don't know if it was supposed to be that exact guy from the sketch into the movie, but it was a similar kind of guy, just kind of like a weird kind of spoke in a straight sort of speech pattern, but there was like a lot of demented kind of things behind that.
Yeah, I think at one point in the movie he says like, Native Americans believe if you stab a man in the winter, the spirit will seep out of the wounds. I was like, oh my God.
Or why did he have to come to me to die? Why did he have to come to me to die? Yeah. And then Wayne and Garth are just like, okay. So, yeah, so that's some stuff that I think that was an example of like a sketch that was beloved that turned into like a beloved movies. Yeah. And that speaks a lot to I think how people just love Dana and love the characters that he played. You had mentioned the McLaughlin group earlier, and I actually want to segue into a little game that I want to play with you, and then we'll talk about that. So, have you played Two Truths and a Lie? Are you familiar with that game?
Yes, I am.
Alrighty. So the topic now is the McLaughlin group, and this is going to be the first McLaughlin group sketch. I think the one that maybe a lot of people are familiar with. Okay. So in these sketches, John McLaughlin would bring up issues like right away when the sketch started. Issue number 1, issue number 2. So issues that John McLaughlin brought up to the panelists in the first McLaughlin group sketch. I'll name 3 of the issues, and one of the statements is false, and you have to spot the false one.
Hit me.
All right. So an issue that John McLaughlin brought up to the panelists: is there an afterlife? An issue that John McLaughlin brought up to the panelists: what is the best way to make an egg? And an issue that John McLaughlin brought up to the panelists: what motivates me? Why do I conduct my show in this manner? So which one is false?
I'm gonna go with the second one. What's the best way to make an egg?
You're correct. That was not. Yes, that was not an issue that John McLaughlin brought up to the panelists. But I can totally see him the way that sketch sort of escalated to just ridiculousness. That's something that came up to my mind. Like I can see John McLaughlin asking him that. So that's something that you had brought up earlier in the show. So tell me about what your memories are of the McLaughlin group.
The McLaughlin group. I mean, well, the most memorable one is the one you probably remember it too, where there was that music cue that came in accidentally too soon. Like I forget which episode it was, but it was one where the McLaughlin group was the cold open, and then I think so at the end of the sketch, Dana as McLaughlin says, "All right, final question: How does SNL usually start their show?" And then somebody answered, "They stay live from New York on Saturday night." And then when he said that, the drummer of the band like started drumming, but he wasn't supposed to. He was the sketch was still going, so he came in too soon. Dana heard that and he said wrong to the drummer.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah,
yes,
thunderous applause from everybody because that's a great. I mean, that was a great moment of like a performer like hearing somebody make a mistake and getting a laugh out of that mistake.
I mean, that doesn't surprise me. Dana's a comedic genius. The fact that he's that quick on his feet in that pressure cooker that can be SNL in a live setting. That's hilarious. I remember another one that was a cold open. It was a Halloween episode of the McLaughlin Group when John McLaughlin actually came on the show, and he had a good sense of humor about it because when Dana does impressions, I think it's mostly out of love, and I think this one was out of love too. Because if anybody's out there has not seen the McLaughlin Group, the real show, go on YouTube and watch and even skim through an episode, and you'll see that Dana's impersonation in the show itself isn't too far off of what the actual McLaughlin Group was. But I mean, you want to talk about chaotic sketches in a good way. I mean, that one was rapid fire, just nonstop funny.
No, it was fantastic. I also liked the spin-off with the Sinatra Group where it had Phil Hartman as Frank Sinatra. Yes. There was a sketch where it was Frank Sinatra. I think Chris Rock was Luther Campbell from Two Live Crew. Jan Hooks was Sinead O'Connor. And then it had Sting was Billy Idol. And then I have Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet. Like that's Phil Hartman. That's a whole other topic, but like that's.
But I mean, inspired. The McLaughlin Group sketch became so popular that it inspired spin-offs amongst the cast and amongst other recurring characters. You don't often see that, like somebody's recurring sketch or character inspiring somebody else in the show or other writers in the show to do a spin-off of that. Like that's, that I think that says something quite a bit. So yes, if anybody listening out there hasn't checked out the McLaughlin Group sketches, please do. Please do yourself a favor and go check those out. Something else that popped out to me was his Johnny Carson. And I don't know if you have any memories of him doing Johnny Carson on SNL, but to me that was close to peak Carvey right there in those Carson impressions.
Yeah, no, it was pretty spot on. It was pretty perfect. It was, I mean, him and of course Phil Hartman as his Ed McMahon were fantastic. And again,
you are correct, sir.
See, exactly. Like those two impressions are like the impressions that other people base their Johnny Carson and Ed McMahon impressions off of. Like they put down the blueprint. I don't know how long he had that impression just like locked up in the chamber, how long he'd been working on. But like when he came, it was like fully formed when he debuted it on the SNL. Like it was always pretty fantastic. I mean, one of my favorite memories of it was I guess it was like in the early 90s or so, maybe late 80s. But Arsenio Hall, Arsenio show, because basically it was around the time where Arsenio Hall, his show was like the hot new late night talk show in late night, and like Johnny Carson was kind of a old, bit of a dinosaur at the time. So they did this sketch called Carsenio where Johnny Carson sort of mimicked Arsenio Hall in order to like sort of get some relevance again. So it's Johnny Carson with a high top fade and just acting like Arsenio Hall in like a bright red suit and talking about doing the wild thing. And my God, it was fantastic.
All right. That is nice. We are back. Boy, do they sound fine. That is my posse, Ed.
Yes, sir.
Did you know that? It's not called a band anymore. It's called a posse. Weird, wild stuff.
That it is, sir, yes.
A posse. I did not know that. Now, some of you at home might not understand some of this lingo, which earlier in the day our staff compiled from the streets. Now, when I said my guests were in my house, what I meant was in the studio.
Yes.
That is some weird, wild stuff.
Yeah, Arsenio on his show would shout out, like if somebody would happen to be hanging out in the audience or in the dog pound or whatever they would call it. With Arsenio, it was usually somebody cool. But on the Carcinio show that you had just mentioned, he shouted out professional golfer Tom Kite. that was hanging out back there. And then George Wendt came on and was like, "Hey man, like, why you don't have to be doing this? Like, why are you doing this, Johnny? This is
Yeah.
So yeah, that was definitely as a child, that Carcinio sketch is one that really stayed with me.
I do remember that George Wendt was there, and he was like trying to talk him down out of it. And Carson's like, "No, these people in the audience, they love it. I go whoop whoop whoop, and they go whoop whoop whoop." And I think George Wendt says, "Yeah, those people are idiots. They don't know what they're doing."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And with his Johnny Carson impression, I'm not sure that Carson, did he say weird, wild stuff on his show?
I don't think so. See, that's the thing with Dana's impressions. He would like say something and repeat it, and that would be kind of like the catchphrase. And then that thing would be attached to the person he's impersonating, whether that person ever said it or not. It's kind of like how when people do that Seinfeld impression, and it's like, "Oh, I gotta tell you, I want to know." I don't think Seinfeld ever said that, or he doesn't really talk like that. But it sounds like he would. It sort of captures his essence. So It's weird how like something like that sort of gets attached to the original person.
Like he captured George Bush's essence with saying "not gonna do it," and I don't think Bush ever said "not gonna do it." And then Dana will say himself that sometimes he's instead of saying "not gonna do it," he just goes "nah nah nah nah." Like it's just like the rhythm of it to him. Like same with Ross Perot, like you brought up. He like, "Can I finish? Can I finish? Can I finish one time?" Like it's almost like a song. It's almost like a rhythm in a song to Dana's impressions that that it transcends more than just mimicking the person. And you brought up the perfect word. Like it was the essence of the person. That's what Dana was just so good at capturing.
Yeah, and absolutely, he was able to capture like he was able to capture like just something about a certain person, just maybe something like a small tick or just some type of body language or the way he spoke or speech pattern. And he was able to like sort of fixate on it and focus on it, and just sort of he's able to make an entire impression around that one little thing. I mean, it's pretty fantastic when you think about it.
Yeah, it's great stuff. Is there anything else from Dana's time at SNL that listeners should know about when thinking about his Hall of Fame candidacy?
Well, again, if you want to talk about his dark sense of humor, I mean, we could, grumpy old man. We have to mention that, which again, it's again another character, no name. He'd only come out during a weekend update segment, and he would just talk about how things were better back then, better than they are now. But as he would talk, he would kind of say things like, "Oh wait," like as he was talking, you realize that stuff wasn't better back then, but you liked it because it happened back then, back when you grew up.
Today, everybody's spoiled rotten. When I was a boy, we didn't have these video games. We made up our own games, like chew the bark off the tree. You and your friends would find a nice oak tree and you start chewing the skin off of it. And there were no winners. Everybody was a loser. It rotted your teeth and left your intestines scarred and knotted. And that's the way it was, and we liked it. We loved it.
And we liked it. Yeah.
We liked again, another catch. And we liked it.
Yep, that's something that my friends and I, because we were big comedy nerds growing up, that's stuff that we would repeat, and we liked it, and that's because of Dana, man. That's so awesome. That's a perfect example to bring up something that I highlighted, definitely too. You mentioned too the Dana Carvey show. So that was his sketch show on ABC, I believe. They ran it in '96. Did you watch that when it aired? That piece of insanity?
I actually did, because I watched it back then, but then I also kind of rewatched some of the episodes because we talked about that on SNL because there was a documentary about it recently. It was called Too Funny to Fail. It was on Hulu. I believe it's still there. But I mean, on paper, the show should have worked because again, it's Dana Carvey. It's his type of humor, but like he wanted to go more darker with it, like a lot very Monty Python-esque, you could say.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Louis C.K. wrote on it. Charlie Kaufman, the director, worked on that show.
Wow.
Robert Smigel, I believe, worked on it. Steve Colbert and Steve Carell acted on the show. Like, on paper, it had everything going for it. And, like, they also interviewed, like, Bill Hader. He was also in the documentary, too, because, like, back when he was a kid, he loved the show, too. And, like, they talk about, the issues with the show because it was... one thing, it was on ABC, like, in their primetime hours. Second law, they put it on right after Home Improvement, which they count that for their down... Because, like, people weren't ready for this, Home Improvement, and then going right into an opening sketch of Dana Carvey dressed as Bill Clinton with multiple nipples.
Yeah, that was the very first sketch in the very first episode, wasn't it? Like, that's how. Yeah. It was just Dana and them saying this is what the show is, like, right up top.
Yeah, they came in hot, and I think they said they like really fought for that too, because like the network was like, I don't know about this, man, and like I think what's it, Dino Stamatopoulos, I think, who also worked on Community, wrote on that show too, and like a lot of Conan people worked on that show, but like they were like sticking to their guns, like, no, we have to take a stand, we have to set the tone right off the bat about what this show is going to be. And from what I understand, like the moment people saw that, like the ratings took a nosedive. Like people turned it off immediately after like the first 5 minutes. Oh, but I stuck with it. I really liked the show. I thought it was hilarious.
It was really good, and I have a vague memory because I think I was 14 or 15 actually when it aired, and I have a vague memory of watching it with my parents, or at least my mom, in the same room, and she's a big SNL fan. So like when it came on and we were excited, like, oh, Dana Carvey has a new show or whatever, and then that first sketch, like, when you mentioned Bill Clinton with all the nipples, and the whole concept was he's a nurturer or something, and he's going to nurture the entire country.
Yeah, he was going to feed the earth.
He's going to feed the earth or something, and so I have a memory of being really embarrassed, turning red when that.
As you should. Because I think it's one of those things where it's like we said, like Dana Carvey kind of has this wholesome image that people kind of see him as, like, middle America, lovable mainstream guy. But like he also has that darkness in him, and on the show we got more of that darkness than I think people were expecting and were not ready for it. Like I think like if you're a fan of shows like Monty Python or Mr. Show, you'd like the Dana Carvey show. If not, then it might not be for you.
Yeah. So his work after SNL. I mean, he appeared in stuff here and there, but it was kind of sparse. I think he did some stand up here and there too. Currently, he has his podcast with David Spade, the Fly on the Wall podcast, which is really, it can sometimes be a good look at the show in particular. I know he and David they talk about the show, but a lot things outside of the show too. So I think that got renewed for season 2 as well. But yes, I mean, Dana thrived, and his time at SNL was just so memorable and legendary. I don't think he could come close to matching or topping it after his SNL career.
Yeah.
So before we head out, just, if you want to give the listeners a quick summary of why you think Dana Carvey should be in the SNL Hall of Fame.
Like I said before, I'll reiterate it. So many cast members are lucky if they get one reoccurring character with a catchphrase that like sort of permeates SNL history. And my man Dana Carvey has 4. Garth Algar, Hans and Franz, the Church Lady, George H.W. Bush, the ultimate George W. Bush H.W. Bush impression, the one that everybody bases their impression off of. Like you can say a Church Lady line, well, isn't that special today? And people would get it. We will pump you up. No way, Garth Algar. And again, like his laundry list of impressions, Ross Perot, Casey Kasem, McLaughlin Group, Johnny Carson. Like he's, like so many impressionists that I can think of. Maybe have like 3 or 4 good impressions in their arsenal. And this dude had like so many. I mean, again, doing an impression of Dennis Miller right next to Dennis Miller. I mean, the dude's undeniable. So that's my pitch. I mean, Dana Carvey, undeniable.
Undeniable, Darrin Patterson says. Dana Carvey, undeniable. I tend to agree with him. I think this is a lock. I've got to say, I don't usually go out on a limb like this and put my behind in the air, but I'm going to do it. And I'm going to say, yeah, Dana Carvey is a lock as a first ballot Hall of Famer. Will he come close to Will Ferrell's mark? I don't know. I don't know if he'll get up into the high 90s like Ferrell did. Well, Ferrell was a low 90, but I don't know if he'll get above 92%. But it'll be interesting to find out, won't it? Darrin, we really want to thank you. If you're out there and you don't listen to SNL Nerds, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life, frankly? You need to start listening to this podcast. Darrin is the co-host over there, and it's a great podcast. Now, what we're going to do is what we always do, is we are going to cement the deal here for Dana Carvey and play a sketch that was handpicked by our co-host, Thomas Senna. This is the McLaughlin Group, and this is a really terrific sketch. It's got the rat-a-tat-tat delivery that Dan Aykroyd made famous, but this is Carvey doing it. It's political, but very funny. I don't know what else to say about it. It's really good. You've got to give it a listen. So why don't we do that right now? This is Dana Carvey and the McLaughlin Group on the SNL Hall of Fame podcast.
From the nation's capital, the McLaughlin Group, an unrehearsed, hastily assembled program presenting inside opinions and forecasts on major issues of the day. With Jack Germond of the Baltimore Sun, syndicated columnists Pat Buchanan and Eleanor Clift, and Morton Kondracki of the New Republic. Now here's the moderator, John McLaughlin.
Issue number one, the commander-in-chief in Mexico. Bush wants a free trade agreement. What does President Salinas want? Pat Buchanan.
John Salinas is playing up his recent economic success and steering his country toward...
I don't think it's so much what Salinas wants. It's what the Mexicans...
John, this is just another case of President Bush trying to push a policy.
I'm not sure Bush has a policy, which is part of the problem.
Pat, I believe Eleanor has the floor.
Thanks, John. The hard truth is that Bush needs Salinas more than Salinas.
Morton Kondracki.
I think this agreement talk is basically a pipe
Wrong!
dream.
There will be a free trade agreement. It will take place within 1 year. Issue number two, Maggie out, Major in. The new British Prime Minister. Some believe he's a Thatcher clone. Will he carry out her policies? Just come on.
Well, Thatcherites are privately rejoicing.
Wrong! More tone.
See, Thatcher endorsed...
Wrong! On a scale of 1 to 14, 1 being lowest degree of likelihood, 14 being absolute metaphysical certitude, what are the chances of Major continuing Thatcher's alliance with Bush vis-a-vis the Iraqis? Eleanor Clift.
I'd say about a 12.
Pat Buchanan.
Hold it, 14 is most likely?
Yes.
I'd have to say about a 9.
Jack Jamon.
Lower, like 5.
More tone.
8.
Wrong! The actual degree of likelihood is 6.5. Issue number 3, life after death. Some pundits say it doesn't exist. Theologians disagree. Is there an afterlife? Jack Jamon.
I really don't know.
More tone.
Well, it's not my field.
Pat Buchanan.
I'd like to believe, but it's
Wrong!
hard to...
There is life after death. The soul does not ascend to heaven, but rather rests in a limbo state that varies depending on the karma of the spirit. Issue number 4, intelligent beings on other planets. Yes or no? Pat Buchanan.
I would think so, but...
Eleanor Clift.
Don't know.
Jack Jamon.
Me either.
Morton Town.
Well, no one really knows.
Wrong! There is intelligent life in the 11th galaxy on the planet Neptar, which will conquer Earth in the year 5482, utilizing us for slave labor and the Shalunian salt mines. Issue number 5. What number am I thinking of? Pat Buchanan.
Geez, 82.
Wrong! Eleanor Clift.
Is it between 1 and
Don't
100?
skirt the issue.
40.
Wrong. More Tontine.
212.
Wrong, Jacarino.
True.
Wrong. The correct answer is 134. 134. Issue number 6. What did you have for breakfast today, Eleanor?
Some cantaloupe.
Morton Town, USA.
I had poached eggs and toast.
Jajamondo.
Bacon and eggs.
Patty Patty Buke Buke.
I'm thinking waffles, maybe
Wrong.
a little.
You all had Special K with banana. Issue number 7. What is issue 14 going to be? Some say it will deal with an economic matter. Others believe it will involve Germany. More teeny tiny tabletop.
Oh, acid rain?
Wrong! Eleanor, gee, I think you're Swellenor.
I have no idea.
Wrong! You know quite well, you're just shy. Mondo, Jackalope, G-Man, Mania,
Well, it might be.
I'm not finished with your name, Germanical. Jack-o'-lantern, J.G., Jummy Mayhem.
You're insane, John.
Wrong! I'm perfectly sane. Everyone else, however, is insane and trying to steal my magic bag. St. Patrick of Buchanonomics.
I think I'm going to leave, John.
Wrong! You can't leave. All the doors are locked from the outside. Next issue. What motivates me? Why do I conduct my show in this manner? Mondo!
You're a jerk.
Eleanor!
Really large ego?
Wrong! I was neglected by my parents and I overcompensate to shadow my feeling that I have an inadequate intellect. Next issue.
So, you didn't know your parents very well?
Wrong!
Wrong?
Wrong!
Right?
Wrong! Next week, the SNL probe continues. Is my money in a savings and loan? If so, what's my account number? Bye-bye!
That is textbook. The heightening and expansion of the premise. You know, it starts out relatively sane and it just picks up and goes from there. And the audience is loving it. They buy into every second of it, and it's really quite great. And Carvey's rat-a-tat-tat, delivery is reminiscent of Hall of Famer Dan Aykroyd. I think it's fair to say that Carvey will soon be in the hall with Dan Aykroyd, but of course that's up to you. You'll have to vote when the time comes, when the season is wrapping up. We'll do some roundtables, and then it'll be voting time again. But I'm getting way ahead of myself because we have a whole season of wonderful guests and wonderful nominees to discuss. 14 more, including next week. We've got a heck of an episode with Buck Henry being the nominee in the host category. Buck Henry, very, very ubiquitous with the show in the 70s. Could have been on the show in the 80s if it had worked out. Is he a Hall of Famer? By my metric, it is. We'll have to wait and see, though. That's what I've got for you this week. Thanks for coming out. Make sure to tell all your friends. We're here, and this is season 3. So there's that. Now, if you would do me a favor, on your way out, as you're walking down the hall past the Weekend Update exhibit, turn out the lights, because the SNL Hall of Fame is now closed.
Thanks for listening to the SNL Hall of Fame podcast. Make sure to rate, review, share, and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at SNLHOF. This is Doug Denant saying, see you next week.
To podcasts and such.